Hey there, everybody. This is Duane, and this is another episode of Math on the Rocks. Cole and Scott are not with us because my job today is just to introduce the webinar. And before we do that, I just wanted to remind you to make sure you subscribe so that you are aware of every time we upload a new video or a podcast, whatever you want to call it. We're on the major stuff. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We're everywhere. So let's get started. For this webinar, man, we were so stinking lucky. We had Deborah Crayton join us. Now, neither Cole nor I knew who Deborah was. She was kind of introduced to us through friends of a friend of a friend. And man, the community stepped up. The math community stepped up. Deborah was amazing. I'd like you to enjoy this episode where Deborah kind of talks about how to build community through cultivating like curiosity and investigation. Like we don't have to create a community through gimmicks and games and all that sort of stuff. Math is where the community can be built. And we could do it through cultivating curiosity and engagement and investigation. And that is how we get community. So enjoy this episode with Deborah Crayton. We are absolutely so lucky to have Deborah here. But before we introduce her in official, full-on Technicolor, I want to thank our partners. Our newest partner is way up in the upper right-hand corner, Yolo County. We have all of these counties who have joined together to say yes to the idea of building a math community. So these partners have invested their time, their energy, and they've given their participants, their audience, kind of like permission to join us. And, because Cole and I, when we were running all of these conferences as part of our roles for California Math Council, we just got tired of conferences ending. And then all of a sudden, the community that we built for 36 hours went away. And so we want to thank the partners for saying, we want to continue with this idea of building math communities. And we want to make this a normalized year-round endeavor. All right, now to that end, I'm going to stop sharing because now I'm going to let Deborah kind of get going. I want to thank Deborah. This is kind of cool. Speaking of communities, Deborah Crayton is a senior curriculum specialist for Imagine Learning. And she is a living example of what Cole and I are talking about when it comes to community. Somebody was at a conference who talked to somebody who talked to somebody who was a friend of somebody. And through this beautiful chain of community, we got connected with her. And we get to be graced with her presence. We get to learn about her and get to know who she is. Deborah, it's all yours now. We're so lucky. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening, or actually it might be afternoon or morning, wherever you are. But thank you for joining us just the same. As Duane said, I am Deborah Crayton, and I'm super excited to share on the topic of building community by inspiring curiosity and helping students make creative connections. It's really important for us to create a culture where students can be inspired, not just so they are having a good time, but so they recognize that mathematics happens outside of the classroom. I want you to imagine a world where students are actually excited. They light up when you say, all right, everybody, it's time for math, because that doesn't normally happen. But if we create these communities and provide students with opportunities to connect, then I bet we'll start to see the change that we're looking for. All right, I'm going to take us on in. Get ready for some mathing. Get ready to have a good time with me because I'm ready to math with you. Because we are talking about California, we were invited by California. I thought it was appropriate to open by just sharing a little bit of some of my takeaway from California's amazing mathematics framework. Because if our youngest learners experience a math culture of curiosity and wonder, then it lays that foundation that is needed for them to develop into competent problem solvers, and it prepares them to face all future math challenges with confidence. So when I think about the framework, obviously, I'm just going to share a few highlights and how it aligns to the work that we'll be talking about this evening. These are the things that come to mind: big ideas, growth mindset, open pathways for all students, cultural relevance, environmental connections, real world connections. We want students to have agency over their learning. We want students to experience inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning. We want a focus on sense making. And the framework gives us some guidance around these key elements that we need to have successful math environments. And of course, this list is not exhaustive, but what it does help us think about is how we can work to tell a coherent math story, which is so critical to student understanding. Now, the other thing that I personally love about California and the work that you all are doing is that you have these principles and concepts that talk about the environment and the relationship that humans have with the natural world. And if we can also marry that with math education, then we are going to be creating global citizens who love math and understand how it can help them solve real problems. So, as we're exploring tonight together, I keep saying tonight, it's night here for me, but as we're exploring together, I want you to think about how these environmental principles and concepts are showing up in the math work that we're doing together. I am lucky enough to work at a place where within the curriculum, there are these cool Inspire Math videos that will help us see math in the real world and make connections that are pretty obvious. But I want you to also think about the ones that are maybe not so obvious. So that's our intro. That's where this work is grounded. We're talking about the framework, the environmental principles and concepts. And now it's time for us to jump in how these things can support us with building a community. And it all starts with an invitation. An invitation into the mathematics is the first step in building this community that we're talking about. Because most of us know that mathematics is that subject that evokes an emotional response from many. And we're not just talking about students. Many adults that we come into contact with also have an emotional response when we mention mathematics. The sad part is that even our youngest learners, some as young as first grade, are already experiencing math anxiety. Okay, why does this matter? Because the way we feel about mathematics influences our ability to actually engage with mathematics. It impacts how we pay attention, how we remember information, how we approach problems. So it's our responsibility to put students' minds at ease, and we can do that by creating a culture that invites all students and helps them recognize that they belong in this math space. So how do we do that? We start by launching every math class with a warm-up of some sort that provides an invitation into the mathematics. And right now, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to engage in a warm-up routine called estimation exploration. And as we do, I want you thinking about how it offers an invitation. Cole and Duane are going to monitor the chat so that we can kind of get into this together. So we have a shape, looks like a square to me. And then there's this shaded region. It's seafoam green, maybe seafoam blue. I think it could go either way. But if you had an estimate for the area that is shaded, what would that be? Don't go to the chat just yet. I want you to first think about an estimate that would be too low. It's just probably not this, but I'm going to just put it out here. It's definitely not this low, but it's reasonable. We're not going to say zero. So go ahead and start dropping in the chat those estimates that's probably too low. Too low. Is it like 1/20th? Like, is that a reasonable thought? What are you seeing, Cole?
I'm looking at the chat. I'm still in some answers here. I see 1/10th, 1/15th, 1/20th. I'm just so glad that I saw these before I typed something in. It was going to make me look real dumb. So
Oh,
this is
stop
good.
it.
So I was like 4, but you know what? It definitely is lower than 4's too high. So I'm gonna.
All right. Well, then that's what's next. Go ahead and throw those estimates in that are too high. Too high. Could it be a half? Probably not.
Mhm.
You know? And then once you do that, let's just go ahead and get all of those wrong answers out of the way. Too low, too high. What is your just right estimate for that shaded region? Now let's start to see those just right. It's reasonable to think that it could be about, and what are we seeing?
So I'm seeing a lot of 1/8.
Okay. All right. 1/6, 1/10, 1/8. I would say that's reasonable, right? And guess what? The point of this is not to get an exact answer, but to get a range of responses. So I'm not going to give you the right answer because there isn't one. What I am going to give you is this follow-up question. If we were with students, of course, they're having some discussion and they're talking with an elbow partner. They're explaining why they believe it could be that. But that exercise, that part was just about reasonableness. We want you getting in the ballpark. And now this follow-up question, is the area of the shaded region more or less than 1/2 times 1/6? And how do you know? Now, based on those first responses, you're probably thinking about some things. And students might say something like, well, I think it's more because my estimate for that shaded area was 1/6, and 1/2 times 1/6 is like saying 1/2 of 1/6. They might say a full range of things. But my question to you is, how does a warm up like this provide an invitation to all students? How does this type of warm up help students recognize themselves as assets to the community? This specific warm up provides a space for students to take risks, especially since there isn't one right answer and there's a range of possibilities. Students can learn from the ideas of others, they can revise their thinking. The goal of this warm up as an invitation to build community is to provide a sense of belonging. We know that mistakes are a part of the process because we started by putting out what is too low and too high. So basically, let's start with the wrong answers. It's also designed to help students recognize that there are multiple path solutions and that their thinking is valued, their voices will be heard, and that also they are the ones who are empowered to take ownership of their learning. This warm up sets the tone for the rest of the math block. It encourages discourse and, of course, curiosity. I see things happening in the chat. Duane, you want to tell us what's going on there before we move on?
Yeah, we had, you kind of asked this question of how does the warm up like this
Yes.
provide an invitation? We're talking about, well, it's clear that there was no single answer that you were looking for.
Yeah.
Louis said since it's open-ended, students can take risks. They've been
Yes.
given the freedom to take risks. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Thank you so much. So we had our little warm up. I hope you're starting to feel like you're a part of the community out there in the abyss. And now we're moving into curiosity and wonder with our youngest learners. And how do we inspire curiosity and wonder? Well, with the littles, they bring it with them. Our youngest learners are looking for ways to make sense of literally everything they are learning. They come to school with their developing math identities, and we're responsible for nurturing their core beliefs about mathematics. This is essential to helping them develop positive math identities. Because again, how we feel about math determines how we interact with math and engage with mathematics. But it also impacts executive functioning, decision making, critical thinking, problem solving, and self regulation. So we should probably get it together. So, with our youngest learners, we're talking kinder, pre K, loading, just saying. But with our kinder students, they have to learn about a lot of things for the very first time. There are also some things that they have to unlearn or they have to think about differently. The more we can support them with concrete examples and help them make connections to their little worlds that are now expanding, well, the more prepared they're going to be to continue to make sense of everything that they're taking in. Because without sense making, there's a very strong possibility that the new information won't stick. So it is up to us to make it make sense. So now we're going to check out a kindergarten warm up. Someone who I know is in the room will love this. What do you notice? What do you notice? Kindergarten students are going to be learning about all types of math tools. Here are a few of them. I want to see it in the chat. What do you notice? All right, you're up, Cole. What are we noticing?
Noticing lots of different representations in which I might be able to count with.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. And what do you wonder? What might kindergartners wonder?
What kind of dinosaur can I make with those pattern blocks?
Right? Now, of course, they might notice and wonder the colors, the shapes, or even how many of a thing. But if we want them to recognize these things as math tools with a specific purpose, then it's going to be up to us to establish that context and give them opportunities to make these connections and make connections to how we use tools in our lives every day. Because as someone said, building a dinosaur might be top of mind when the blocks come out. Maybe they've seen Lincoln Cubes before, but they built a tower, and I'm not talking about a tower of 10. They were building the tallest tower that they can build. So the role that we play when it comes to helping kindergartners, for example, learn about math tools, we want to make sure that they recognize they have lots of tools at their disposal, but we also want them to know how and when to use them, because that's even better. And if we think about the standards for mathematical practice, which outlines different proficiencies, processes that students will need to develop alongside the math content, we want to make sure that they understand what it takes to choose a tool and use it strategically. But first, we want them to understand why they need to use these tools. And there's a video coming up that is going to support that learning. I just have to tell you that within the Imagine IM curriculum, we have these Inspire Math videos. They're super cool. Of course, I can't show all of them because we don't have time. So you're just going to see little clips. I try to make sure it gets right to the math connection, but I want you thinking about how this type of launch could support students as they learn about math tools. You're in for a treat.
But getting to the ants isn't always easy. The ants often hide underground, where the chimps can't reach. How will the chimp get the ants? This one has a clever trick. It finds a long, thin stick and pokes it into the ant nest. The chimp waits for the ants to climb onto the stick, then scoops them out. Delicious.
And gross.
The chimpanzee is using the stick as a tool. The tool is helping the chimp do something. People use tools too. A saw is a tool that can be used to cut wood. Scissors are a tool that can be used to cut paper. And a fork is a tool that can be used to get pickles out of jars. If we didn't use a fork, it would be much more difficult. Like using a stick to reach ants, using a fork makes it
a lot easier. So the name of this is Chimps Use Tools. And I think it's pretty cool that at the beginning of the video, the chimpanzee actually designs a tool to solve a problem. The problem of getting to the ants underground, which sets the stage for the conversation about why we need tools and the importance of having the right one for the job. So you know the question, this question is going to keep coming up. Take a moment to think about, how does this type of launch inspire curiosity and creative connections? Because being intentional about inspiring curiosity and priming students to make creative connections is essential to nurturing positive math identities. When students have opportunities to see math in the world around them, that's the first step to helping them see math as something that can help us solve real problems. It also helps them think about math taking place outside of the classroom. By using videos and books and having children bring in their own stories from their families and their environment also builds knowledge that can provide the context for future mathematics learning and explorations. So, with the launch of this lesson focused on the tools that we already use and the tools that we will now use for math, students have this point of reference. They have something to connect this new learning to. And even in kindergarten, we can support them with engaging in discourse, especially since we gave them something to talk about. Something that is unique about the way these videos come into play, and of course, you can use videos, you can use books, you can find things no matter which resource you're using to get students to think about how they'll see math in the world. But we have a cycle where they have 3 views, and it's patterns after the 3 reads math language routine, which supports students with reading a mathematical text, a situation, a word problem, but it's read 3 times, and each time you read, it's for a particular focus. The question, the prompt, the thing that gets kids thinking, how will I solve? What is the answer? That's held off until the 3rd read, so students can spend time just making sense of the context before they think about their method. So by adapting the 3 reads routine, we offer the same benefits with the 3 views. I kind of call it the remix, because these videos are shared at the beginning of the unit, the middle of the unit, and then at the end. And students have an opportunity to make new connections. As they're learning more of the math throughout the unit, they'll see more connections to the work they're doing. Now you might be thinking, well, do they want to see the same video over and over again? Well, I want you to think about how many times you've read a book over and over again or watched a movie over and over again because of some little person in your life. Because I know I saw Mulan more times than I care to admit, because that is the movie that my kids were obsessed with. So watching it over and over again, it won't bore them. They'll actually probably be really excited because they missed something that first time or that second time. But the thing that is really cool about it is that students now have this common experience, and they're set up for discourse, and they can interact around this shared experience and context. And it's something that now all of the students have information about, and they've had multiple views, so they're building up their knowledge base. As we move into the upper grades, you'll start to see how more and more we can make cross-curricular connections using this same strategy. I'm seeing a lot going on in the chat. Cole, what do you have for us?
Just a lot of agreeing with you. I dropped a link to the 3 Reads protocol from Stanford in there so people can get more information if they're interested about that.
Awesome.
April said that this allows students to understand that it is okay to use things around them to solve problems. It also allows
Yes.
students to see that they don't have to automatically know the math. They can use tools
Yes.
to support meeting their needs. And Annie thinks it's a great routine and very thought-provoking, very thoughtful.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
Of course.
So now we move into third grade. Creative connections, we're trying to make them. How does creating an array support multiplication understanding? Okay, that's for us. But when we launch a topic like this with students, we have to find those friendly prompts that help them think about why they would want to move away from their strategy of, I don't know, counting all, counting by two, or just doing repeated addition and not making that shift. And we think that when we present things that the kids are going to be super excited and engaged, but the truth is some students will jump right in while others will avoid making eye contact because they don't want to give up the strategy, whether or not it's working for them. Because I did have a student who would hold on to a strategy and say, I just keep getting the wrong answer. But when you suggest a new strategy, they didn't want to try it. So again, how do we get them to see for themselves that they should maybe consider a different strategy? How do we inspire curiosity about arrays? So you know what's up first, an invitation. So I'm about to share an image for a few seconds for this. How many do you see and how do you see them? So make sure that if you've looked away, your eyes are back on the screen because I'm going to flash it. I'm going to take it away. And your prompt is how many do you see and how do you see them? We're going to be looking for those answers in the chat. Are you ready? Are you ready, Duane?
I'm going to beat Duane. I got
Here we go.
All right.
That was fast.
How many did you see and how did you see them? I'll go back for you.
No, I got it.
How many? How many?
Well, I agree with Maxine. She's in the and Meg.
Okay.
The community steps up and saves me.
All right. So I would imagine that you're seeing lots of 20s, but I also would imagine that people came to that number in different ways. So one thing I am positive that is not in the chat, even though I can't see it, I counted them one by one really, really fast. Yeah, I'm thinking no one did that because this type of warm-up is actually designed to encourage students to subitize conceptually by learning and leaning on the structure that has been provided. They don't have time to count one at a time, and that is intentional. So now they have a conversation, they share their ways of thinking, and they have this prompt. How did seeing equal groups help you know how many triangles there were in the array? So maybe students will say they added groups or counted by 5. Maybe they noticed 10 and then they doubled. Maybe they recognized that they could use 5 times 4 or 4 times 5. And all of those responses would be welcome. If we weren't in a webinar setting, you might share the thinking. You would just, quiet thumbs up when you believe you have a response. But for the sake of this, we're just going to share what might come from students and what I've seen come from students. But after this invitation, we still have to convince students that changing to using the structure of an array matters, don't we? So maybe we start bringing out the pictures, the pile of oranges, and we tell them that it would be much easier to count larger quantities if we use an array. And perhaps this is the question that they will be excited about because now they see oranges and pumpkins. Or maybe, whether they say it out loud or not, students are thinking, when will I ever need to count a bunch of oranges or pumpkins? So can I latch on to the array structure because I want to solve this problem? Maybe not. But check out this clip of a real world situation that is interesting enough to get students talking. Again, at the beginning of the video, what you're not going to see is there's the setup and a little story about a ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal that caused a major traffic jam.
50 ships travel through the canal every day. Now, they all had to take the long way around, or wait. And so the traffic jam got longer and longer, and the problem got worse. It's difficult to quickly count the ships since they're spaced out around the entrance to the canal. But if they were arranged in an array, it would be much easier because the ships would be in equal rows and columns. This is especially helpful when there are hundreds of ships. When vehicles form arrays, they're easier to count. And that can make it easier to monitor congestion, like the number of cars stuck on highways, or the number of trucks waiting to unload deliveries.
So, oranges, pumpkins, 50 watermelon, probably not as interesting. But here we have this context about something that really happened. And it's something that's interesting. And then we are making sure that they see why this math, why this structure might be helpful. So by the time students have watched this video that third time in the unit, they've probably made plenty of connections. And they also are probably thinking, okay, this array structure might be helpful. But maybe there's even a student who was intrigued and looked up information about the Suez Canal drama. Students now can have math conversations, but more importantly, they can just have conversations. They have a shared experience again, and math is connected to that. And for those students who might need some support jumping into conversations, additionally, we provide sentence stems, we provide sentence frames, we give them prompts that can help them with whole group sharing, but we also provide prompts for them to share in peer-to-peer dialogue. Because we know that a language-rich environment supports math understanding. So with that in mind, we want to help them find real-world connections that are interesting and worthy of discussion, and most importantly, connected to mathematics. So here's your moment of reflection again. How will this kind of launch inspire making creative connections and having conversations? So even though I've shared some of those thoughts, feel free to add to the chat and add to the conversation, and we'll check in just a moment. On to sixth grade. All right, so environmental connections. We talk about STEM all the time. We know there's supposed to be some science and math connections, but it's not really often that we pull them together or that we really highlight it on the math side. Sometimes we need to provide students with windows into other worlds because we're talking about farming and word problems about land plots. And I grew up in New York City, so I would probably be thinking, what are you talking about? But how can you bring me in? How can you inspire my curiosity? Well, Rudine Sims Bishop wrote about windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and the importance of students seeing themselves, but also peeking into the worlds and environments of others, and then making connections across those environments. And even though she was talking about literature, we can still adopt those principles and ideas for mathematics. And it's especially important to help students connect their realities to this big picture and the role that they play in the global society. And we can help students consider how they influence the environment and how they will benefit from making changes locally that can have a global impact. So we have students who we want to have, this vision for green spaces, but you look all around and it's a concrete jungle. Where could we possibly put more trees? There's no land. But what if through a lesson on surface area, students were able to make a connection to what it could look like to make a city a little more green? So this invitation, of course, it's a sixth grade invitation. We're exploring nets, polyhedrons. It's so cool. The nets are fun to create. And throughout the unit, there are some awesome connections in the math itself. But I can only speak for myself. I remember lessons like this making me excited because we get to pull out art supplies. It's fun. There's all paper folding and cutting. That's what I was excited about. And guess what? That's what the students were excited about. So they had a good time, but I could say with confidence, they probably had no idea why it actually mattered in real life or why we were doing it in math class. The curriculum I used at the time didn't make that clear. And I didn't even think to try to find a connection back then because I was just focused on getting through the unit and excited that we had a fun activity. So looking at this, students are like, okay, cool, I got it, I got it. When will I ever use this? You know, that's when they start asking it. Sixth grade, ugh, when will I ever use this? Why are we even learning this? Well, how about pairing that activity with an Inspire math video or an inspiring math video to get kids thinking about how surface area applies to the real world, specifically greening the cities. Check it out.
Developers have to accurately measure the building so they can figure out the space they have to work with. This helps them to figure out the type and number of plants they need. Some green buildings use up to 50 plants per square meter. Bosco Verticale has added an enormous amount of extra greenery to the city. The two buildings occupy a total land area of about 1,500 square meters. But the garden covers more than 20,000 square meters. If the entire city was covered in green buildings, it would look like a forest.
Now, of course, you're only seeing a clip from this amazing video that highlights the need to create more green spaces, especially in urban areas. But can you imagine the opportunity for students to make creative connections as they learn about surface area based on this work that was done in Milan, Italy? Like they're really looking into the window of someplace, but can be inspired locally. So I take us right back to our prompt. How will this launch inspire creative connections? And in this case, maybe even a little hope. Take a moment to drop a response to this one in the chat. As we run out of green space, we do have to get creative. And I know we're starting to see city gardens pop up around the country. And this type of video might just inspire or spark some excitement and hope for students because it presents an innovative option for greening our cities. So just take a moment and Cole, Duane, either of you, when you see some interesting things in the chat, it would be great if you would just speak it into the space for us.
So Annie says it was awesome, and she was in Milan last summer, but didn't know she was supposed to be looking for them, those buildings.
Oh,
Yeah. But now we do, Annie, so we'll have to go back.
take me with you.
Meg says that nature and natural settings are good mood lifters as well.
Nice.
Gosh.
Awesome.
I had an offline conversation with a participant who was asking about nets and what is a net and how does it connect? And so we Deborah, you did some mind stretching where we're learning content.
Wonderful. I love that. It's what I do.
I'm
Cool.
kind of thinking like the expansion beyond what we're talking about as we really like lean towards like, there's a lot of, and Duane, I think you called it out, this idea of like this connects to some of the social justice work even in the new math framework, right?
Yes.
And, I think there was a number thrown out of how many trees per X number of people or residents, right? And if you did like master planning for your city beyond that, like what evidence might you take around some of that work? So it was just interesting. My brain is going a bazillion different directions right now because of the video.
I love that. That's what we want for students. See, thank you. I feel like I planted you in the audience. This is amazing. So the last grade we're going to take a peek at is 8th grade. And we know that phones are the extension of the young people today. But we want to make sure we're finding balance between technology and just that reminder that we live on the planet Earth and that we need to care about the environment. So we want to consider that there are ways that we can raise awareness about the natural resources in a way that makes sense to students and in a way that it matters to them. So we need to prepare students, and we need to also be prepared with an answer when they say, when will I ever use this? Why does this matter? Whether they are doing well and excelling in the mathematics or being challenged by it, we want to make sure that it is important enough to them that when it gets hard, they persevere. Because I think too often we let students opt out in a way we never would with reading when it gets hard. So if you're trying to understand math because you recognize it can help you solve real problems, that's a different level of inspiration and motivation that we're going for. So here is our last invitation, and think about how it brings students in, but then how we can inspire them to be curious about slope in a real world situation. So here's our invitation. It's a really quick one. Which three go together? And simply answer which three go together and why you think they go together. What's cool about this is that students are invited into the mathematics. They know there are multiple solutions, and they can share any idea as long as they can justify their thinking without the pressure of there being only one right answer. So they can stay on that mathematical path. A, B, and C go together because they're all going up from left to right. Or they could simply point out that A, C, and D are all the same color. And no answer is valued higher than the other. So knowing that your ideas matter, that's another way that we can continue to cultivate that sense of belonging in our class communities for all students. I'm seeing a few things in the chat. Cole, what you got?
Sorry, I was typing my own response in there. Let's see here. We've got all kinds of things. We have.
Hang on, Cole. I'm going to interrupt. Cole, you need to talk about how A, B, and D are connected. Like everybody else is coming up with a good, reason and justification, positive slopes. They're all intersecting at the same point. And then you just dump out A, B, and D. So
I put why I thought that. So
where?
I think that A and B are parallel lines, and D is the transversal that cuts them.
Oh. Ooh.
That's right. How do you like my 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon thinking, Duane?
This is me turning off my audio right now.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Mic drop. Let's go head on to that next slide then. Well, here's the cool thing. A lot of times, and one of the lessons in this unit is actually called, I don't want to say it incorrectly, but it's close to this, that slope doesn't always have to be positive. So in this video, students are informed about helium being a natural resource. And in this example you're about to see, they're talking about a source that they found in Tanzania, but they're also talking about how it is diminishing. So check out this video about helium. Again, just a clip. Sorry you missed out on like the whole picture, but you'll get the idea.
Early tests suggested it contained around 54 billion cubic feet of helium. Globally, we use around 6 billion cubic feet of helium every year. So at current rates of use, this single location could hold enough helium to last the whole world 9 years. But then, further tests indicated there was even more helium down there. Scientists increased their estimate to 98.6 billion cubic feet, and then increased it again to 138 billion cubic feet. The higher the actual quantity of helium in the deposit, the longer it will last at a constant rate of use. And at a lower rate of use, that helium would last even longer. Global supplies of helium will still run out one day. There's a limited supply. And once it's gone, it's gone. But each new discovery helps to push that day further and further into the future.
So now, I can only imagine that before watching this, students might not be that alarmed that helium is diminishing if their only context for helium is that, yeah, party balloons floating to the ceiling, or when you inhale it, it makes you talk funny. But now learning that scuba diving equipment, rocket launches, and MRI machines also require helium just might get their attention in a different way, or at least inspire curiosity. So here we are again. We're thinking about how this launch could help students consider how people influence natural systems and that slopes don't have to be positive. So we're not disconnecting the mathematics from this real world situation. We're actually finding ways to make it relevant to students and showing them how understanding slope can help us predict how long this natural resource could potentially last and why that matters. It also gives them a context for applying mathematics. It also sparks curiosity about this real issue that affects us all. So our time is winding down, and we are right on time. We started talking about building community by inspiring curiosity and creative connections. And I think I've said those words enough times for you to realize that was really the goal of our time together. We covered a lot in a little bit of time, but I hope that you feel you have at least something that you can take away to use in your settings. Now, of course, you might still be wondering, what are some ways that I could do this? I don't use this curriculum, but that's okay because we want to remember that even our youngest learners, they come to school filled with curiosity and wonder. And if we're not careful, then we can actually be the reason why the sparks are dimmed or the creativity is crushed. We don't want that. So, with that in mind, I have a call to action for you. Be intentional about cultivating curiosity so that students develop a curiosity mindset, realizing that mathematics can help them solve problems. Always invite students into the mathematics and work to cultivate a culture of belonging for all students. And present real-world connections to students and support the development of innovative solutions to real problems. Lastly, find ways to use cross-curricular connections to raise awareness about how we influence and benefit from natural systems. Help students see the role that we all play in protecting natural resources and preserving our environment. All of this work supports the development of positive math identities for our students, and it also lays the groundwork for building math communities that inspire curiosity and creative connections. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire a little hope for the future. And with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And I hope that you took something away. If there's a question that you wanted to present, or if there's something in the chat that we wanted to lift before we call it.
So we do. We have a question. So Maxine is wondering if, she teaches virtually. So she's wondering how might this curriculum work in a virtual setting?
Okay, how much this specific curriculum or doing this type of work? Because just as we're in this webinar space, working virtually, being able to share video, being able to share stories, being able to bring in real context, I think there's still a place for that no matter the resource you're using. But we have digital platform, we have these things embedded. I mean, Imagine Learning specifically, Imagine IM, that if you are using the digital platform, the videos are embedded in our learning platform. It's like woven throughout the curriculum. Every unit at every grade level has the Inspire Math real world connection videos included.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for your time today. And just my brain is going a bazillion directions. And I just do want to call out that I appreciate in the helium video that we did not show the popping of the blue balloon, because that was a whole dilemma in my household.
Oh,
Thankfully, it was repaired and it flew for Thanksgiving. But there was a whole somehow
I love Bluey.
somehow my 5-year-old saw that video and it was anyway. So it was good times. But I appreciate you for not for that part not being there, reliving some trauma. But thank you. Just remember that this is part of our ongoing Inspiring Math Mind series. So this takes place the third Thursday of every month from 4 to 5. So be on the lookout from an invite from Duane. In addition, if you can't get enough of Duane and I, you can join and tune in to our Math on the Rocks podcast, hosted out by CMC as well, where we are talking about all the rocky topics in mathematics. A lot of them are California specific because we have a lot of rocky topics right now. But we do stretch, we do stretch ourselves. And just thank you. We will see you all in January.